Good afternoon, welcome to the Alex Williams Show. Today we have a discussion on decriminalisation and whether it is the way forward. On today's show we have Ray Turner and Craig Littler. Good afternoon, gents.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Arguing for decriminalisation and arguing against Ali McFadden and Taylor Dugan. Good afternoon, ladies.
Good afternoon, thanks for having us.
Good afternoon, thank you.
During this discussion today, I, Taylor Dugan, and my partner here, Ali McFadden, will provide a clear, undoubtable evidence as to why prohibition, the current drug policy in which our voted government supports, works well in reducing harm to the individual and society. Our current drug policy in the UK is to restrict supply, prevent use, enforce law and address problematic drug users.
We would like you all, using your clickers, to tell us how many people you think are currently in prison for a drug-related offence.
According to the Bureau of Prison Statistics, in prison for drug offences, in which 48.7% of the total prison population. We want you now to think of the harm caused not only to the individual, but to the families, taxpayers and society as a whole who are suffering due to this selfishness.
We would like you all now, using your clickers, to tell us how many of these offences are incarcerated for personal use.
More than 1,000 people in the UK are given custodial sentences for possession of drugs for personal use each year. Most of these people are problematic drug users. This does not take into account the amount of people imprisoned each year for drug-related crimes to fund their addictions. The American Medical Association, through research, now says drug addiction is a disease of the mind. This evidence shows that problematic drug users are being sent to prison for something that is considered to be a disease of the brain. We don't send someone to prison for a physical disease and have the National Health Service to deal with their problems. So why is it that someone who has a disease linked to drug use are penalised by having their freedom taken away and imprisoned? Research by Crew B in 2006 carried out around drug dealing within prisons. The research found that drug dealing is ongoing amongst prisoners. The research also suggested that prison staff were aware of those drug dealers amongst the prisoners. Staff were aware of one source being a significant dealer within the prison. Surely these prison guards are an active working member of the criminal justice system, which is supposed to be protecting people from harm. This is absurd. Large numbers of drug users are incarcerated in most countries in prisons across the world. Rates of drug use amongst male incarcerated prisoners is far higher than rates of drug users in the general population. Surely this is putting these problematic drug users in more of harm's way than it is protecting them from. A study was carried out to explore the dependence of heroin, cocaine and amphetamine amongst incarcerated male prisoners in the UK. Between 1994 and 1995, 1,009 randomly selected male prisoners across 13 prisons in England and Wales were interviewed for the study surrounding drug use in prison. The study found that 63% of prisoners interviewed had used heroin a year before going to prison, and 71% of these prisoners interviewed had used heroin in prison. These results show that an individual who has not used heroin a year before entering prison is more likely going to use heroin once in prison. More importantly, the previous two pieces of research outline that drug use and drug dealing is prevalent in prison, and total prohibition and criminalising drug users does not work and is in fact causing more of a drug problem. To send someone with drug dependency problems into an environment where they are more likely going to have access to illegal drugs and use illegal drugs is clearly not the solution to targeting drug addiction. This is one of many points why drug-related offences for drug users need to be a health issue and not a criminal justice issue. And the drug policy in the UK needs to be changed. This evidence shows that the current war on drugs is not working and is not in fact protecting drug users from harm.
Thanks for that, Craig. Now, Ray, with your experience working with drug users, what's your opinion on decriminalisation?
Okay, well, I currently work for an alcohol and drug service called Genie in the Gutter that aims to get service users clean and sober so they can maintain this themselves afterwards or enter a rehab. I very much believe that drugs should be decriminalised. Punishing people that need our help is not the answer. I have worked at Genie for almost 3 months now, and I've first-hand seen the addictive power and effects of drug use on people's lives, both physically and mentally. Majority of these are not bad people in my eyes. They've just had a very tough life and use drugs as their way of forgetting the bad things that have happened to them. Therefore, developing addiction problems over time, which has then led to a destruction in their personal lives as well as their health. So is it right to hand these people a prison sentence when they get into trouble due to their addiction, which is sometimes caused by mental health issues or trauma? I think not. The best way to deal with this and protect these people from further harm is to take a health-based approach and take the issue away from criminal justice approaches, as they are mainly considered as punishing the person rather than helping them in some form. Prohibition leads to a combination of lethal chemicals which people then sell freely within the black market. An example of this is the most recent batch of Superman ecstasy pills containing the fatal PMA chemical.
Now we know what MDMA is, but can you explain a bit more what PMA is?
Well, PMA is a similar drug to MDMA. PMA is more poisonous than MDMA and can kill at lower doses. It takes longer to affect on the body than MDMA, meaning some users overdose mistakenly thinking nothing is happening. Superman pills contain a large lethal dose of PMA. Surely prohibition is putting people in more harm than it is protecting them from in this case. This also may put someone off calling the emergency services if an overdose occurred with such pills, as they have fear of conviction. Decriminalisation of drugs will take these fears away and surely reduce the harm associated.
Ellie, what's your view on drug addiction?
One of decriminalisation's major faults is when people supporting it refer to drug addiction as an illness. People with illnesses do not choose their path, drug abusers have. They initially choose to take drugs, even whilst knowing that addiction is not guaranteed but a possibility. They put themselves in harm's way and are solely responsible for this. Peter Hitchens argued that drug addicts are not victims, they choose to poison their lives, and prohibition fully supports this. When speaking to prison officers at HM Walkcourse, they told us that when a heroin addict is experiencing cold turkey, it is exactly the same as a bad dose of the flu, which I'm sure we can all agree anyone with an actual illness would rather have that. This concludes that severe withdrawal symptoms are a myth.
The table I am presenting to you shows that drug use is not classified by harm to an individual or society, so it cannot be argued that drugs are illegal because they are harmful. There is no argument to suggest that drugs are not harmful, and I would not be so naive to suggest this. But if we look at alcohol, for instance, which is a legal substance in the UK, which is used so widely across the country, and compare it to other substances which are illegal, it just blows a massive hole in the argument that drugs are harmful, and this is why they are illegal. There are Class A drugs on this chart, which rank far less harmful than alcohol and tobacco, which can be bought on an open market in the UK.
Many of those I have come across at Genie are there for help relating to alcohol, as that has just as much an effect in someone's life as drugs. This may be shocking to some people, as drugs have a very bad stigma attached to them, with some people believing the stereotype of drug dealers being drug users being unemployed benefit scroungers. Alcohol, on the other hand, appears to be very different and is consumed by the majority of the public, often as a way to celebrate and is completely legal to purchase. However, this does not mean it is any less dangerous and addictive. In some respects, alcohol is more dangerous than certain drugs. For example, a person can die binge drinking because the body cannot metabolise alcohol as quickly as it is consumed, which can then lead to a build-up of alcohol in the brain and shuts down the various parts of the brain that are essential for life, such as the sections that control respiration and heartbeats. But what if we compare this to marijuana, as a health scientist named Ruben Belair did? It is shown that this is not going to happen, as the effects are much subtler than alcohol. So should we totally criminalise alcohol as we do drugs, or make both decriminalised and a health issue? I agree with the latter.
Taylor?
Well, right, I hear what you're saying, but at the end of the day, taking drugs is an illegal activity. Illegal activities are against the law, as they are harmful to the individual and others. If people simply abided by the law, then they would not be putting themselves at risk. By arguing that drugs should be decriminalised, is it making it okay for someone to break the law? As Peter Hitchens argued, if people insist on breaking known and enforced laws, they must, for the sake of justice and fairness, be punished accordingly.
Well, the main point I learned from them is that the threat of custody is not a deterrent to stop them taking drugs. so that as they are just as easily available in prison and actually make prison life a lot easier to deal with, so are suddenly more appealing. This is surely the exact opposite to what the criminal justice system was hoping to achieve, so it would appear that this approach simply does not work. However, I'm not speaking for everyone as a whole due to the fact that I've only spoken to a handful of people that have experienced the prison system for drug offences, but each one seems to echo the last. They also inform me about how being sent to prison just disrupted their lives even further. For example, losing their homes, families and personal relationships. Now surely if a person that has suffered with drug addiction goes back into an environment where they feel like they have nothing left, they will simply return to drugs.
Well, the drug strategy of 2010 aims to reduce demand, restrict supply, build recovery and support people to live a drug-free life. Since the strategy has been put in place, as stated, overall drug use is continuing to fall. But however, new psychoactive substances, legal highs, are an increasing priority. These have been responded to strongly through the introduction of legislation and rapid information networks to identify the new emergence of substances. They are now able to identify new drugs and ban them within days rather than months where they have proven to cause harm.
From my time at Genius speaking to the service users, I've been constantly told that legal highs are far more harmful than illegal drugs. How come these legal drugs are allowed to be sold which are obviously putting people in more harm's way than safer drugs which are banned by prohibition?
How many deaths are there per week due to legal highs?
The Chief Advisor for the Department of Health, David Nutt, came out and spoke the truth. Nutt clashed with Jackie Smith when she was Home Secretary after he compared the 100 deaths a year from horse riding with the 30 deaths a year linked to ecstasy. Nutt had criticised politicians for distorting and devaluing the research evidence in the debate over illicit drugs. Nutt is saying that these drugs aren't actually harmful, and he was asked to resign from his post. You are distorting the general public's views to think what you want them to think, not the truth.
David Nutt was sacked because he was promoting an illegal Class A drug. What he did was ridiculous, and arguing that ecstasy isn't harmful and is completely wrong. It wouldn't be illegal if it wasn't harmful. Theresa May stated in 2010 that this government does not believe that liberalisation and legalisation are the answer. Decriminalisation fails to recognise the complexity of the problem and gives insufficient regard to the harms that drugs pose to the individual. It neither addresses the risk factors which lead individuals to misuse drugs or alcohol, nor the misery and cost or lost opportunities that dependence causes individuals, their families and the wider community. Me and Ellie totally agree with this.
What percentage do you think of inmates are in prison for drug-related offences in Portugal?
Since the Portuguese decriminalised drug possession for personal use in 2001, drug abuse is down by half. This has obviously worked in protecting people from the harm that drugs pose. Users are removed completely from the criminal justice system of their country, and any problems they have with drug addiction is now treated by the health service. None of the nightmare right-wing views that legalisation would lead to a massive increase in drug use in the country happened.
Decriminalisation may work in Portugal, but there's no guarantee that it will work in Britain. Our culture and lifestyle is completely different, and Britain is far more advanced than Portugal. What works for some cultures and countries would be frowned upon or disagreed with others, so it would be silly to assume that it would definitely work here. Decriminalisation, whilst being a good argument, has been fought for the past 40 years in Britain and has remained in the same position since. It has many strengths, however prohibiting illegal and harmful substances seems more protecting than allowing them.
Nick Clegg, leader of the Liberal Democrat Party, has openly said to the press that he believes a model for decriminalisation of drugs in the UK is on their manifesto, and promises that anyone found with amounts of drug in their possession deemed for personal use will not be prosecuted or sent to prison. He has said that the war on drugs is not working and does understand that drug use can be very dangerous, but the approach we are currently using is failing and we need another approach to protect people from harm. He agrees with the points me and Ray have presented to you today that drug use needs to be a health issue and not a criminal justice issue. This, I believe, is a massive step forward in drug policy in the UK, and hope this is the first step to eradicate the failing war on drugs and to start dealing with the problem of drug addiction rather than criminalising people and effectively ruining the lives of people who need medical help, not criminal records and prison sentences.
Thanks for listening to our discussion today about decriminalisation. Using your clickers, we would now like to find out, after viewing our presentation and hearing both sides of the debate, who is in favour of prohibition and who is in favour of decriminalisation. That's all for today. Be sure to tune in next week. Bye.